It's 11 past 10. You're on Mornings across ABC Tropical North. Cristy-Lee Macqueen with you. I put this question to you. What's the difference between half a line of cocaine and an hour playing a video game? Apparently, nothing, as far as your brain is concerned. And that is just one of many insights that Brad Huddleston, who is a digital addiction expert, will be giving right around the Tropical North region over the coming weeks. He is looking into how the online world and our use of it, increased use of it, is impacting our lives, not just neurologically, but emotionally as well, specifically for kids and teenagers, and what we can be expecting that'll be the biggest danger next in the digital world. Now, Sgt Nigel Dalton from the Mackay Crime Prevention Unit, he is touring with Brad Huddleston, who is a technology author and researcher specialising in digital addiction. I'll go through some of the spots that they'll be over the coming weeks in this area, but I spoke to them yesterday before they headed off on the tour and began by asking Brad what the dark side of technology looks like in 2019.
Well, there's a lot of good. Let's start off by saying that. Unfortunately, this technology comes with addiction, and these are unintended consequences. When all of this first hit us, particularly in 2007 when the first iPhone was released and we had the internet in our pocket, we had grand ideas of how it was going to change the world, and it did. But then problems started to arise that we never anticipated. A lot of emotional issues, a lot of addictions, a lot of issues with social media and cyberbullying, things that we just did not anticipate. So it was a few years after that that neuroscience jumped in to try to get a handle on what was going on, at least from the brain perspective of what was going on. So the dark side would be addiction, and then all of the related things that come with any addiction. People's emotional well-being starts to deteriorate. People then, once they get addicted, they'll commit crimes. They will steal. They will do whatever they have to do in order to get the drug. And then, of course, the whole sexual issue, sexting, and the pornography issue came about, and it exploded. And so not too many people understood that. So that would be the dark side. I don't want to make it sound like it's all doom and gloom, but there is a dark side.
And Nigel, listening to that, some of the words that stuck out, cyberbullying, online pornography, how prevalent are some of these issues in the Mackay district?
It's as prevalent as it is anywhere else in the world. Once you give a device to anybody, they have access to the internet. It's a World Wide Web. It's called that for a reason. You can get anything on your device which you have in your pocket, and it can then be used for really bad things, and it can be used for very good things. So my role in this is highlighting the overuse of this technology and some of the problems which come from that. If you have a child who's got their device with them the whole time, they're going to be more susceptible to being bullied online. If they are going to be more susceptible to be finding out about sex from pornography instead of parents sitting down and talking to them.
Brad, you've been visiting this region since 2002.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the most pressing dangers that are facing children and teenagers now that you're seeing?
Depression. I've seen that rise to levels that scare me sometimes when I speak to children and young adults. Self-harm. Now, self-harm manifests itself in a number of ways. They will also burn. They'll do different things. They'll pick at wounds and not allow them to heal. But cutting is predominantly the big one. And they go
Can I
hand in
clarify that's in Australia, not just in the States?
It's around the world, and it has exploded around the world. As Nigel correctly said, it's the World Wide Web. So the digital component is the same everywhere. So I go into a lot of countries where I don't speak the language. I have translators. But when I start to speak about the culture, I speak that common language. Kids are watching the same things, looking at the same things. They're learning how to do things from the same sources, which would be lots of video gaming and all that comes with it, but the self-harm. They're all doing it, and they teach each other. And so it's here in Mackay. The depression is off the charts. Nigel and I speak for years. We've spoken to these kids, and it breaks your heart. But we're here to help. That's why we come.
And so what do you talk to parents and teachers about depression and where that evolves from the digital devices that kids are using?
Well, when it comes to millennials in particular, the addiction rate is equal with them as it is their children. So the average age of a video gamer, for example, is 35. So we have to separate the two. and deal with them individually and talk to them, not about their children initially. Now we do, because they have to get together in the home, but I always start with them and say, you have to get sorted, or you have to be a role model. And your kids, you can't say to them, do as I say, not as I do. So we deal with it sort of on that level, but they're suffering depression as well. Elevated levels. We all do. I mean, life happens, but what happens in the brain, the chemical changes that take place from overstimulation and dysregulation from the devices causes an exacerbation of these things. Now, the good news is when people are detoxed, it comes right back down. That's the good news. But trying to convince people that the digital is a problem is a challenge for us.
So when does it stop being a little bit of fun, a little bit of entertainment, some relief after a hard day at work or school?
It's when the addiction sets in. And it's subtle. And because it doesn't have the stigma as, say, cocaine or heroin, it's accepted. It's pushed in schools, all of this. And that's why I keep saying unintended. No one's done this on purpose, except maybe some of the people who hire companies like Dopamine Labs to purposely try to jack up the dopamine through the apps so that people do get addicted. The video gamers are notorious for coding this way, and they test them this way. But for the average user and the average educator, we have to convince them that it is addictive. But once I start listing the symptoms, and I walk with some brain animations and walk them through this, the light starts to go on. And that's where I think we are the most effective and we get the best feedback. Once I start to explain to them neurologically, medically what's going on, then the heart opens and we're able to speak into it.
You're on ABC Tropical North. You're listening to Brad Huddleston. He's a technology author and researcher in digital addiction. Also, Sgt Nigel Dalton from the Mackay Crime Prevention Unit with us. And Nigel, listening to some of those symptoms there, what do you get the feedback from parents and teachers particularly as to what works to dispel this addiction?
Well, I'll just add before I answer that part is one of the things I do in schools is I'm going through the cyberbullying and the prevention and some of the things that you can do. Then I just randomly say to the teachers, the next slide will cause a lot of disruption. And I just put a picture up of an image from Fortnite. And I put that image up on the screen and the whole class will go into uproar.
And for those not familiar, Fortnite is a video game.
That's right. It's a video game where you can play up to 99 other people. Those 99 other people may be 35 years old, as Brad just said. That's the average age of a video gamer. So you're letting your children interact with those people. At that point, I turn to the teachers and say, unfortunately, the Department of Education does not put as much effort into making you as attractive and entertaining as Fortnite. That's why you're having difficulty talking to these children, teaching these children, settling these children, keeping them awake, and then suddenly the light comes on. And I repeat this to the parents' talks, and they say, that's exactly what the problem is. If you allow your child to play Fortnite for 2 or 3 hours before school, when you think they're just having their breakfast and they're just getting along, getting ready for school, and they're playing a video game. When they go to school and they have to do their times tables, or they have to do their spelling, or they have to do something else, that's not very exciting.
It's tough to compete.
It's very, very tough to compete. So those are the types of things we're trying to do. Just regulation, control of that device, when to use it, when not to use it, what to use it for, and how to make sure that those applications, some of them are called apps and some of them are just through the web, that they should be really, really restricting.
This is a rapidly evolving industry, technology, so it makes it really hard to get in front of it, I suppose. What do you see around the corner, Brad, as some of the dangers that are coming next for children using phone apps, smartphones?
Augmented reality, virtual reality's been here. Artificial intelligence. We're going to see a massive, massive shift in how we even interact with our phones and our apps with AI. I personally believe, it's not been tested to my knowledge neurologically, but if the pattern stays that we've observed all along of what has been tested in the brain, we're going to see a massive spike because the stimulation is so much higher. The interactivity, the devices are getting faster. The video cards in the gamers' computers are getting so much faster. And the brain has not adapted. It has not evolved to keep up with that amount of stimulation. So people in my world are talking about a mass sort of breakdown. There will just come a point when people can't cope anymore. I mean, we're already seeing people, children addicted. They can't go to school anymore. There are marriages. We see marriages all over the world. They're in trouble because of those 35-year-old gamers. That's only going to increase. We are seeing positive results, otherwise I wouldn't come and do this.
Now, you'll be speaking and giving talks at several events over the next few weeks. What will you take back from the people you speak to and the interactions you have on these subjects? How will that further in your own research?
Well, we're going to do research, and we do. We survey quite a bit the parents, teachers, and the students. Those numbers will be crunched, and we'll get a really good snapshot of what's happening on a local level, and then compare that against stats from other countries and so forth. So we'll take that back. A lot of the stories and things that we experience here end up in my books and articles that I write. We protect everyone's privacy. But yeah, so it's very helpful, actually.
Nigel, does that make you a little bit nervous?
Oh, it makes me nervous. I sort of roughly know what the problems are. We see it in the community. You need to walk into a cafe, a restaurant. There'll be people connected, but they're all actually connected with somebody else who's not sitting in front of them. I was recently in Geelong on holiday, and I came across this mural, and I think it sums it up really well. It's about 30 metres high on the side of a building, and two parents are wearing augmented reality goggles. And they're obviously enjoying what they're seeing through that, but they're holding a child.
And there's no stopping it outside of electrical failure. So I don't want to be doom and gloom, but in terms of the emotional health, ADHD is up 800% in the last 30 years. That's about how old the internet is. There's no stopping that side of it, that dark side of it. You know, smoking went along about 40 years before people acknowledged that it was causing cancer, even when they knew it was. We know early on what this is doing to the brain. You can look at the scans and clearly see it. But there's denial, as it is with any addiction. So until there's probably, to answer your question honestly, until there's probably a court case, and then a series of court cases after that, just like it was in smoking, there probably won't be any warning labels until then. There probably won't be any meaningful restrictions, meaningful with teeth restrictions on children, which is where it really needs to happen. There needs to be an absolute no from certain ages because we know what it's doing to them. But that is probably, again, not going to happen until someone is seriously injured and there's a court case. Now, that's my prediction. But is it going to happen? I don't know. Probably at some point, but it may take decades like it did with smoking.
It's Brad Huddleston. He's from the US. He's a technology author and expert in digital addiction, visiting the region once again this year with some really interesting insights at the forefront of his research. And we'll check back in with Brad and how those visits go and the research he collects with the feedback during those visits in a couple of weeks' time.